Hi there everyone, welcome back to Dandelion Delphi Tutorials. This video is for our grade 12s. Since we're doing the supplementary of 2015, question 3, and it contains a two-dimensional array. Remember, there's no point in just watching videos, you need to do it yourself. So go to www.education.gov.za and on the right bottom you'll see a link to the past papers. Download the supplementary of 2015, question 1, as well as the data files and practice as you watch. The first part of this question is just showing you what has been provided. There's an array agents, that's a one-dimensional array, and it looks like this. You can also see it in your data files. It's got a code for the agent, each agent, and then a colon and their name, and here they give you an example. And then we have another one-dimensional array, that is array sales, and they explain to you here what it contains. All the agent codes, 120 to 125, all of them then appear in here for the sales of each agent. They always give you the format of the arrays or even text files. We start with a month number, a hash, and then the type. Now the type is going to be a single character C, R, or A, depending on if the property was a commercial, residential, or agricultural property. Then the agent code that would match up with the code in that array there. And then the price at which the property sold. And then they just explain to you more. All of this can also be seen in the one-dimensional array in the provided code. However, these descriptions obviously won't be there. And then they give you an example of the data. There's the month, there's the type of property, so this would be a commercial property, and then the agent code, and then the value of the property. So in button 3.1, we are required to find the agent code of what the user entered in the text box. And we're going to search through the array agents array. And it tells us here to make the searching process stop as soon as the agent code is found. Now you'll find in my Dandelion Delphi book 2, I have a heading there for find 1 in the one-dimensional arrays. And then we need to make the loop stop, so you need to use that process. It's very good code for you to study. It's often asked. Then if we find the code, we're going to display the agent's name in the label provided. And if they weren't found, we're going to display invalid agent code, and then we are going to clear the text box. So press pause and try it yourself. In an exam, you have your 10 minutes reading time, and if you read through this whole question, you would have seen that S code needed to be used in question 3.2 as well. And for that reason, I made it a global variable and declared it there under private. Here's my one array, the array sales, quite a lengthy one, 1 to 132. And there's examples of data there, the number, hash, the type of property, the code, and then at what value the property sold. But we're going to use array agents. It has 6 items and there's examples as well. Now I always recommend copying out either from a text file or an array. Just copy out one example of data and then paste it where you're going to use it, because it does help you to see what should I be searching for in this program. In 3.1 we're going to search for a colon, but in 3.2 hashes and semicolons. So that's important to keep in mind. Here I'm getting input from the user from edtcode.txt. And then to make my loop stop, I will need to make use of a Boolean variable. I just declared it as be found and made it false. And then I also have to ensure that if I don't find it, that my loop will stop. So I have K there, and K is going to run through every item of array agents. But if K is 6, 6 won't be less than 6, so it won't increase to 7, and that means I've reached the end of the array. That's the first condition there of my while loop. If I haven't found it, it will then stop. However, if I do find it, be found is being changed to true in here. So if be found is changed to true, my while loop would stop as well. So there we have k. K is less than 6. The 6 there comes from the declaration. So there's 6 items, and I only want to go up to 6 and not go over that, because then I'll get a runtime error and it will say access violation if I try to go to item 7. There I'm inking my K so that I can loop through this array agents. Now I have used uppercase here in my pos because I don't want my program to be case sensitive. I always include that just in case, unless the question states otherwise. Now if you have a look at the array, this is an example that I copied out there from the array. This is what it looks like. I'm searching for what the person entered in an item that looks like this. If so, pos is searching for this. Remember, what we're looking for goes first. In what I'm looking for goes second. So if I find that code in position 1, then I know that I have found the array item that contains that code, because I can search for a whole string and another string, and it will return where it found the first character of that string, and that would be 1. Since these arrays won't contain the code in their name, so there won't be numbers in their name, you could also have used here greater than 0. It means I have found it. In order to get hold of the person's name there at the end, I would have to remove the first part, and I don't want to change to the provided code this array here. So for that reason, I just stored it as a local variable sname. Now I can find the position of the colon in that name, and I'm going to delete the first part. So I'm going to delete the code as well as the colon. Then what I'm left with in sname is just the name and the surname of the person that I needed to display in the label.caption. Then I'm displaying it. And very important is to change your be found to true to ensure your loop would stop there once it is found. The question then further said if you haven't found it, so this is done outside of your loop. If be found is false, I'm going to clear the code, the edit box with the code in it that was asked, and then I'm just going to display in that same label, where here I displayed the name, I'm just going to say invalid agent code. We can now run and test our program with A123, and then we should see this name appearing. And then for this one here, just type in B123 and you should get invalid code. Here I've entered A123 and I'm seeing that person. And if I change the A to a B, I would get invalid agent code. Remember also that must be cleared now. Now in this here, they have told us that we could choose the output component. So either a rich edit or a string grid. But I want you guys to add a rich edit to your form and display in the rich edit because it is a little bit harder than the 2D array in the string grid. And it also, in the last couple of years, I see that the trend is that they ask us to display in a rich edit. Maybe you could add both and then you can practice both to display. But I will show you both. But let's just do the rich edit first. This here is what we need to produce. So the names of the months, 1 to 12, and then your different types of properties. And if this person sold a property, you would count it. So how many did they sell in each month? And also then categorized according to these 3 types of properties. So what I've done is for this part here, I have created a 2-dimensional array. So my array would have 3 rows, 1, 2, 3, and then the 12 columns. Press pause and try it yourself. Just another note, this here is the total per type of property. So adding all of that together. And this at the bottom here is the total value of the sales. So what did they sell them for, and overall what, if we add them together, what would be the total for this year. In my Dandelion Delphi book 3, I have shown you guys how to display in a rich edit, and also how to do calculations per row, which would be this one here, and then overall calculations as well, which would be producing this value at the bottom. This here is my counter array. I call them counter arrays because I'm going to count how many of each type they sold per month. And I have the 3 rows and then the 12 columns, and they're all of integer data type. Now, since I'm going to use a ink for my array count on the inside of the loop here, I do need to initialize them. So this is what I've done here. I loop through all 3 rows, all 12 columns, and I'm assigning all of them to 0, giving them an initial value. Remember, in my array, the row goes first and then the column second. So my iTotal, that is to determine the total cost overall, or the total value of those values, the properties they sold. That's what iTotal is for. Now I'm going to loop through that one-dimensional array that was provided. There were 32 items. Often when you have a look at an array, whatever is provided in those square brackets is an indication of what we can use in our for loop. We want to loop through all of them. We don't want to make the loop stop. We want to loop all the way through to the end. So let me just go back to my sales. So that is why I am using a for loop from 1 to 32. Now again, I'm going to make changes to this 2-dimensional array, and for that reason I've just stored it there as stemp. So stemp will hold now 1 item in my array. Here I've copied an example from the array for myself here to see what should I be looking for, a hash or maybe a semicolon. Now I need to determine if the code that was entered in the first question, 3.1, that code exists in here. That means this guy sold that property. So I'm going to look for that code in stemp, and if pos returns a value greater than 0, it means it found the code in this stemp. Then I know I'm dealing with the code that was entered and the agent that sold this property. So now I need to get hold of these first 2 numbers. They indicate the month number. So I'm just going to scroll down so we can see a little bit more. There is the hash that I'm looking for in stemp. And now I'm going to copy out from position 1 for ipos -1 because I don't want to copy out the hash. So this will now give me the month number. It's important here to make it an integer, else you will sit with 0, 1, and I can't use that in my 2-dimensional array. But if I convert that to an integer, it would just be a 1, and this will now be my column index in my 2-dimensional array. So if the month was 1, that means it's January. I will be updating column 1. Now I'm getting rid of that first part there to get hold of the property type. In here I've just used stemp1. Remember, your case statement can only make use of char data types. So I'm just interested in the first character that is left in stemp. If it's a C, that was for commercial, I'm going to put this value in row 1 of my 2-dimensional array. If it's an R for residential, it's going to be in row 2, and then A for agricultural, that would be row 3. I now have the correct row and column determined here at the top to update my counter array. So I can just use inc array count with the row and the column determined above. You could also say array count row in our column is assigned to array row our column plus 1. Both will do the same thing. Now I'm done with actually all of that, and I need to get rid of it to update my total of what they sold, because we have used the C to determine our rows, and we know that we are busy with this agent because of all of this being inside of the begin and end of this if statement searching for that code. So the last thing I need to do is find that semicolon there and then delete this temporary variable all the way from here, including the semicolon. So now I'm left with 500,000 in stemp. All I need to do now is string to int stemp. I've stored it here as a local variable, iPrice, and add it to my running total. iTotal is assigned to iTotal plus iPrice. All of this inside of the if statement for when I find this code. Now, just a reminder, when we have a variable on both sides of the assignment statement, or when we're using ink, we need to initialize, and that's why I initialized iTotal and I initialized my array count there. So now I am done determining or getting the values for array count. We now need to display, and I asked you guys to practice in a rich edit first. So we have richedit.lines.clear, and I had to set tab stop just because there was a little bit of a bigger space at this part here, but thereafter the spaces are the same size, so I only need to set the first tab. So I have one tab, that's why tab count is 1, and that would be tab 0, and I'm setting it there to 70. This first part here is to display the headings. So we have January, February, March, and so on, but you can see there's a big space there. So that's why I started stemp with #9. By the way, if you just had a rich edit, and you just output in the rich edit all the names of the months manually, typing them in, you would get the same marks. But remember about the function called short month names. There's also long month names and short day and long day names. I am using the new Delphi. So I have Delphi 11 installed, and short month names would only work when I use format settings dot short month name. So make sure you add that. If you are using an older version of Delphi, this would work. But with a new Delphi, oh goodness, I have to add, let me just undo there, format settings dot short month names. So I'm going to loop from 1 to 12, so 1 would display January, or add that at least to my string. I'm using stemp to display. Stemp is stemp plus Jan and a #9. Then stemp is stemp plus Feb and a #9. And so on all the way to December, and then when I'm done, I'm going to display it in my rich edit. When you have a look here, you'll also see that there are empty lines there, and there. So remember to add them. This is my empty line there, added after my headings for the months. So that's just the headings. Now what I need to do is I need to add the data from my two-dimensional array and display that. So I will need every row, I'm displaying row by row, to start with a type of property. So I want to start with my stemp. If the row is 1, stemp is going to be commercial and that #9 to create my tab space. If it's 2, residential, and 3, agricultural. Now what I need to do is I also need to, apart from just displaying, I also need to determine the total per row to display here at the end there. And I can do the displaying or the building of the string at least and getting the total per row all in one loop. This is a nested loop. My for loop there runs through all the months. But it is important for every new row that you start that your total is set back to 0. So here my nested loop is a for loop 1 to 12, and I'm building my string with my array that I determined above. So stemp is stemp plus into string of my array count, row first, column second, and my tab space with a #9. And then itotal is itotal plus that same value from my two-dimensional array. So now our row total will have the total per row. And this will have all the values all the way up to December, that part there. Now I still need to add my total before I display. So stemp is stemp plus the row total that I determined there. And then I display, and then I have my empty line. Because after displaying a line, so when I row is 1, I would be displaying that. Then I need an empty line. And then I will go to residential row 2, starting with residential and also the row total as 0. So there's my empty line, and that's the end here. This is the end of my for loop for the row. This here is the end of my for loop for the column. It does help sometimes. There's no marks for it, but it helps if you add some comments next to your ends to make sure you know what they belong to. So now it will go to row 2, start with residential, start the row total for residential as 0, loop through all the months, build the string, add the totals, add the total to the end, display that same line, and then also the empty line. So you will see here stemp gets a value there. So once I'm done with commercial, it is changed then to residential. So the old data is deleted. I won't be adding on to the back. I will have my empty line then. After row 3, there's my empty line. And then all I have to do now is display the total sales, which is stored in itotal. Remember, itotal got a value in my previous loop here, where I was updating my array count. So itotal will have the value of those prices there that I determined. It's just one value. So outside of this for loop, because I want to display it only once, total values of sales, and using my floater string F with FF currency, because I can see there it's a rand value, and then comma 10, comma 2, I can see they have displayed, oops, that's a mistake. It should be comma 10, comma 0. So now you're ready to run and test your program with a 1, 2, 3. Now remember, I can't just click on array sales there. I'll get a 0. I need to first type in a 1, 2, 3, find the agent, and then click on agent sales. You can ignore this output here that I actually used. I have also displayed in a string grid that we can do next. So that actually went with that. But here, this top part here is displaying in my rich edit with the sales there. Now you can add a string grid. The top part are determining these values that you don't need to change. It's only the display that you need to change for your string grid. So you can just, I just added a, well, I should have probably said that at the beginning. I added a page control here. But you can put the string grid over your rich edit, it doesn't really matter. And just add on your output to your string grid below that code. That's any place below this code here where we determined the rows and columns that needed to be updated. That still stays the same. Press pause and try the string grid output yourself. I also added a label because it said there any other suitable output component may be used other than the one given in the example. So here is my column headings, again using short month names with icol, and I'm looping from 1 to 12. Remember now when we look at our string grid, we want to display it there at the top. That gray area there is row 0. This is column 0. And in our string grid, our columns go first. Remember, string grid dot cells, I call first the column first and the row second. So row 0 would be that top row, and looping through all the columns 1 to 12, displaying the abbreviations of the month names. Then to add those headings or the labels, they are, if we have a look here, they would now be in, I need to move this, that would be in column 0 down there. So that is what I'm doing here, is I'm displaying my three. It's not possible to use a loop, and I have my string grids.cells. It's in column 0, and then in row 1 I'm displaying commercial, 2 residential, and 3 agricultural. And you could change the column width there of the first one just to be a little bit larger to 100. Now, to display in a string grid, we can either start with the row or the column, it doesn't matter. However, this question asked us to show the row total. So for that reason, I have to start with a for loop for the row. That's also the reason why in my display for the rich edit, I started with a for loop for the row, because when we're displaying in a rich edit, we are displaying row by row. So if the question in a two-dimensional array is about the row, so show the totals per row, or display in a rich edit, that's row by row, we will start with a for loop for the row, and the inner loop will be the for loop for the column. And the code here to get the total per row is the same. I initialize inside of this loop. I then loop from 1 to 12. I add my counter arrays together, row and column, and then in the string grid, I then display this in I row and I column. That is the values of array count that I determined above. You can see clearly here when it is a string grid, cells, column first. And when it's an array, rows go first. And then finally what I needed to do is in the column, the last column here, so after I've displayed in 1 to 12, I've displayed the months values, then in column 13, so that's where the 13 comes from, I need to display the row total, but I can use my row variable because when I'm in row 1, I'm determining the total for commercial, so that would still be in row 1 but in column 13. And then finally in my label.caption, I've just displayed the totals there. I quickly changed that, my error, to a 0, not to display any decimal values, so that I'm able to display that bottom bit here, total values of sales. And that was it. Thank you guys for watching Dandelion Delphi tutorials. For more information about two-dimensional arrays, you can go to Dandelion Delphi Book 3, and one-dimensional arrays are covered in Book 2. Please leave some comments if there's something you want me to explain next, or if something is unclear. Hope to see you soon.